What this current crisis in the Middle East has shown is that a global energy system that is built on fossil fuels is inherently volatile and unstable. The reality is that 3 out of every 4 persons on this planet live in countries that are net importers of fossil fuels. And this includes the 1.4 billion persons in China, the 1.4 billion persons in India, the 450 million people who live in the European Union, over 1 billion people who live in least developed countries, small island developing states, and most of the continent of Africa. So when there's a geopolitical crisis or a natural disaster in one of the main fossil fuel producing regions or countries, the shocks reverberate across the global economy. It results in rising energy prices, rising food prices, it results in rising costs of pharmaceuticals, and this has knock on impacts on inflation and the cost of living in countries. For developing countries, the shocks are even more severe because many of these countries are under severe debt distress. And when global interest rates rise, it means that they have to pay more on their debt, which means that they have less fiscal space to invest in the development priorities of countries: food, health, education, social care. So the reality is that fossil fuels leave the world more vulnerable, they leave households more vulnerable. And this is why the transition is such an important global effort. If the world is able to transition as fast and as quickly as possible, it gives countries and people autonomy over their energy future. We've been using fossil fuels for over 200 years, and we still have 800 million persons globally, 600 million persons in Africa who lack access to electricity, and over a billion lack access to clean cooking. So renewables offer us the opportunity not only to gain sovereignty and independence over our energy future, but to finally deliver energy access to those who have been living in the dark for centuries. So, this is why the transition is such an important global effort, and this is why the United Nations continues to stand behind pushing and pushing and pushing and working to ensure that we can get a just, fair, and orderly transition.
Exactly. All right. Thank you, for explaining that in detail. Now let's talk about implementation. There are a lot of talks about, taking climate action and a lot of promises as well. Turkey this year is scheduled to host the COP31 in
Yes.
Antalya, where
Yes.
we are currently. What do you think Turkey's role is in speeding things up and in the implementation of, the talks and the promises that have been made concerning climate action?
First, it's absolutely great that a country like Turkey has decided to accept this global role. With this global role comes huge responsibility. First, leadership by example. So it's absolutely critical that we see Turkey being at the forefront of leading the energy transition. And we know that it's one of the countries where renewables are accelerating at an unprecedented pace. So leadership by example from Turkey is absolutely critical. And secondly, at the international level, we're living in very difficult times: geopolitical tensions, divisions, fragmentation. And Turkey is an extremely unique country. It has the ability, and we've seen it in the past and we see it now, of bridging the divide between north, south, east, and west. And on this agenda, we have some very difficult issues. But the reality is that none of these issues are insurmountable. For example, on the transition, we know what the challenges are. The transition has been impeded in most parts of the developing world by finance, and in particular, the high cost of capital. If we're able to bring stakeholders together around finding solutions to the high cost of capital, this will definitely help to speed up the transition. So Turkey's international role this year as COP president is to bridge the divide on some of these very difficult issues, but not insurmountable issues.
Absolutely, you make great points
Yeah.
there, and thank you very much for granting us this interview. That was so sound, and yeah, thank you.
No, and
Welcome
thank
again
you
to
guys for
AFROTUK
what you're
TV.
doing. No, thank you guys for what you're doing. You're building awareness among youth and young people, and it's absolutely great that you're doing this and that you have this energy and spirit. Continue to do this good work, and
Thank you so much.
we will always be very supportive of your effort.